The Last of Us Part 2 was one of the most divisive games in recent memory. Because who could have guessed that killing one of the most beloved characters in video games and then forcing people to play as the woman that went over par on his head would make people upset? Needless to say, when HBO announced they'd be adapting The Last of Us into a show, a lot of people were wondering how they'd handle the controversial story of Part 2. Would they change anything according to Backlash in order to try and redeem the story? Or would they just double down on the original telling of events, dooming the show to suffer the same poor reception as the game? Well, Season 2 of The Last of Us show is completely out, and the show has managed to become even more controversial than the game. The season honestly opened up with promise, but every new episode brought with it increasingly questionable writing choices. Even Ellie, a character who in the game is universally beloved, seems to be mostly disliked by fans of the show. And not in like a, well, she's murdering people, you're not supposed to like her kind of way. People dislike Ellie in the show because the writing is terrible. Before we jump into all the bad stuff, I want to say I really do think that the show had potential. There were even times where I can confidently say I was actually enjoying the show. Some of the show-only content does a great job of fleshing out additional characters, the story, and the world in general. Things like establishing Abby as a character, giving you her motive up front, as opposed to the game where you don't know anything about her when she shows up to tee off on Joel. There's also a huge action set piece that takes place in Jackson that adds to the lore of the people that have lived in this world for years. They give Jesse a slightly bigger role as a leader in Jackson, making his early exit a little bit more impactful. You see, there really are times when the show feels like it's moving in the right direction, but then almost all of the positive changes lead to a more egregious writing decision later on. To show what I mean, let's look at one of the show-only changes that I really liked: the Horde attack on Jackson. This sequence, very cool. It really makes the town feel lived in when we get to see how they've prepped and trained for this very moment. We get to feel the desperation the town feels on the brink of losing, only to have them overcome the Horde. We get to see Tommy display leadership and resilience against a freaking bloater. It's a beautiful scene that wasn't in the game, and the show was better for it. But in the game, Tommy's supposed to be with Joel when Abby drives on his head. Now in the show, Dina's the one with Joel when this happens, so she sees the WLF patch and later takes the information to Ellie. She tells Ellie that she remembered she heard about the WLF from Eugene, who used to be a Firefly. You know who else was actually a Firefly, but is also related to Joel? This begs the question, why even have Dina here? I don't want to understate Tommy's role in protecting the town, and like I said earlier, the Horde attack is great, but having Dina be the one with Joel just sort of feels like an excuse to give Dina more agency. And if you want to see one step forward, 50 steps back, look no further than Dina. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of Dina in the game. Her character isn't bad, she's likable enough, but it just sort of feels like she's a plot device for Ellie. You can kind of see this in how quickly they jump into Ellie being in a relationship with Dina, even though they don't tell us anything about her. To rectify this, the show fleshes out Dina a bit more. There are show-exclusive scenes between Dina and Ellie before going to and while they're in Seattle. Dina shares an extended version of her past with her family, and we even get to see her use her map skills she learned during her brief stint as an explorer. The show intentionally puts more care in building up Ellie and Dina's relationship than the game, and it should have been a welcome change. Unfortunately, a lot of this emphasis is placed on their relationship during their literal assassination mission, and it contributes to one of the biggest flaws in the show. It really doesn't feel like Ellie cares all that much about Joel's death. There's probably a few things that contribute to this, but I've narrowed it down to two main things, one of them being Dina. On their second day in Seattle, Dina gives this weird monologue about how if she was in Ellie's shoes and someone had killed her family right in front of her, then Dina would have hunted that person forever. I think it's supposed to be a bonding moment between the two of them, but instead it just comes across as Dina having more resolve in their mission than Ellie does, and that's a huge problem. However, the main culprit for Ellie's seeming indifference has got to be the fact that she cannot stop cracking jokes. A lot of Ellie and Dina's dialogue sounds like it's supposed to be in an edgy teenage coming-of-age film, rather than a gritty apocalyptic revenge story.
Oh, you think that no matter what happens, I'm just gonna start firing?
Literally every single time, yes. Don't get angry. You're a little crazy. And that's exciting.
I didn't remember this being a problem in the game, so I revisited part 2, and honestly, Ellie retaining her lighthearted, sarcastic nature post-Joel 1 is pretty accurate to the game. During the whole exploration of Seattle, Ellie and Dina are flirting and making lighthearted conversation. In fact, Ellie even makes a quip about raising farm animals with Dina. Yet I don't recall seeing anyone upset that Ellie wasn't taking her revenge seriously enough in the game. So why does show Ellie seem to care way less than game Ellie? In the game, there's a lot of downtime while you're exploring where Ellie and Dina have lighthearted chats and you get to know them better. But there's still the time for action where you're fighting multiple groups of infected and wolf soldiers, which adds stakes and a sense of progress to your journey. The game doesn't have to worry about chopping the story up into hour-long episodes that'll fit into a short 8-episode season. It has the freedom to take its time telling its story, whereas a show has a limit on what it can fit in. For example, by the time Ellie finds out Dina's pregnant in the game, she's already fought multiple groups of wolf soldiers, killed one of Abby's friends, and found pictures of the rest of Abby's group on the body of a different one of Abby's friends, thus making some real progress toward achieving her goal. Whereas in the show, she doesn't kill one of Abby's friends until after finding out Dina's pregnant and after reuniting with Jesse. So show Ellie has accomplished way less, but more of her dialogue is being used for jokes and lighthearted banter. Whether the player realizes it or not, the exploration and the combat encounters of the game are a means to communicate Ellie's grit and her determination towards her mission. So the writers of the show needed to find a way to communicate these same aspects of Ellie's character through a different means, and instead of doing that, they make Ellie carefree most of the time, and it ruins the tone of the show. It's easy to see how different both Ellies are if we compare the scene of Dina revealing a pregnancy in both the game and the show. When Dina reveals she's pregnant in the game, Ellie's taken aback. Dina tries to break the tension with a joke, and Ellie ends up getting upset with her. In her shock, Ellie calls her girlfriend a burden. She's struggling now because she's been forced into a spot where she feels like she has to choose between the woman she cares about and the child she's carrying, or completing her mission to avenge her father. This right here is an Ellie that's starting to succumb to anger, lashing out at somebody she loves. It's a pretty powerful cutscene that displays Ellie's conflicted nature. It would have been a perfect scene for the show to give us a glimpse into Ellie's true feelings. So how does the show handle the same reveal? Well, Dina tells Ellie she's pregnant, and they immediately hook up. And then Ellie gives us the most controversial line of the entire show. Ellie's gonna be a dad. Truthfully, I think in a vacuum this isn't a terrible line. It's supposed to be a joke, and it's a little funny. And in the game, Dina even makes a similar-ish joke when she tells Ellie the baby isn't hers. But remember, in the game, we've accomplished way more by this part in the story. But in the context of the show, they just got to Seattle, they've killed one random wolf guy, and they've yet to make any actual progress in their mission. And yet Ellie's now taking the time to sleep with somebody, joke about morning breath, and talk about their future as parents. Ellie is supposed to be in the middle of a mission to send the woman who killed her surrogate father 6 feet away from her face to the Shadow Realm. The show can't decide if they want Ellie to be in dad joke mode or revenge mode, and the emotional whiplash makes her feel like a completely different character from scene to scene. I saw a Reddit post recently that was making an argument that the reason Ellie isn't just sad or angry all the time is because she's masking. The post goes on to say that people are nuanced, and just because Ellie is suffering from grief and depression doesn't mean she can't also be doing her best to put on a brave face and try being her normal self. Now, I'm not an expert in psychology, but as a viewer, this doesn't really feel like what's going on with Ellie. You gotta remember, she grew up in a post-apocalyptic world where they're constantly fighting for survival, and she just witnessed her dad's murder right in front of her. So while the death of a loved one in real life is always hard, I think Ellie's experience is just a little bit different from people today. So to say she'd experience grief like you or I kind of feels like a stretch. I think what's more accurately happening is the fact that the writers don't know how to write Ellie with nuance, so they just have her jump between moods when it's supposed to make sense. And if the first 6 episodes weren't enough to convince anyone that the writers didn't know what they were doing, the last episode of the season is the final nail in the coffin. In the final episode, Ellie and Jesse head out to find Tommy when they witness a Scar kid being run down by a group of WLF soldiers. Ellie wants to save the kid, but Jesse prevents her from doing so under the premise that he's going to be a father soon, and he doesn't want to die for people he doesn't know. They eventually get to a spot where they can hear Tommy firing off shots, but at the same time, Ellie realizes that Abby is likely in the aquarium. Jesse wants to go help Tommy, but Ellie wants to chase after Abby. This starts an argument between them where Jesse tells Ellie to think about the community, and in response, Ellie crashes out saying she doesn't care about the community. The only community she had was killed right in front of her. She then chastises Jesse for not wanting to save the Scar kid earlier just because he's not in Jesse's community, and she uses this moral high ground as an excuse to abandon Tommy, who's currently in trouble. Then, at the end of the episode, Jesse tells Ellie that he chose to come to Seattle after her because he knows that if he was in trouble, Ellie would set the world on fire to save him. And she agrees. I don't know if you remember this, but like 20 minutes ago, she abandons Tommy while he's in trouble. What are we doing here, man? For some reason, a lot of the controversy around the show seems to surround actress Bella Ramsey. People are blaming Bella for not looking enough like Ellie, saying she's not a good enough actress to carry a show as the main protagonist. How is any actress supposed to deliver these lines and play this character in a way that redeems Ellie? While she may not be the best actress, there are still multiple performances throughout the show that prove Bella is adequate for playing this role. You can feel her shock and sadness as she's witnessing Abby beat Joel, and I think she does a really great job of succumbing to her rage in the hospital scene with Nora. Her final scene with Joel where she confronts him is pretty well done. I think Bella does a good job of portraying the mixed emotions that were required for this major moment, especially when you consider the writers made it more difficult for her by combining the scenes of Ellie finding out the truth about Salt Lake and her attempt to reconcile with Joel. Is the reason this was one of the best scenes this season due to the fact that most of the lines are taken directly from the game? Probably. But at the end of the day, it just goes to show the potential of Bella and the show in general when the writing is done well. It's not Bella Ramsey's fault that this Ellie doesn't feel like this Ellie, and this Ellie doesn't feel the same as this Ellie or this Ellie. To be completely honest, I don't fault Bella for the inconsistent writing, but I still think HBO should have aged up Ellie by recasting. Not because Bella Ramsey isn't talented, but one aspect of Ellie that makes the tone of the show feel weird is the fact that Bella doesn't quite look the part. Now hear me out. I don't mean this in the same way other people do when they say that she doesn't look enough like Game Ellie. Pedro Pascal doesn't look or talk anything like Joel, but people don't seem to have a problem with him. What Pedro does look like though is an old man, and that's close enough to get people over the hurdle because Joel is written well. My issue with Bella is that she just looks too young. I mean, look at her next to Jesse and Joel. She just kind of looks like a little kid. Now, this worked perfectly fine when Bella was playing young Ellie, but now that Ellie is supposed to be aged up, it creates dissonance because Bella still looks the same as she did in season 1. Episode 6 is a series of flashbacks showing us how Ellie and Joel's relationship has changed over the past 5 years, and I just kept getting distracted by the fact that even though the screen said time was passing, Ellie looked exactly the same. HBO already has a popular show where they changed up some of the actresses to show the passing of time, so I'm not sure why they couldn't do the same for The Last of Us. Bella Ramsey isn't to blame for looking young. If anything, she does what she can with the material. But unfortunately, it does create a visual dissonance where in key scenes meant to show Ellie's maturity and growing darkness, she still kind of looks like the teenager from season 1. So oftentimes, rather than Ellie feeling like an equal to Joel, when she confronts him, it sort of just seems like a kid talking back to their dad. So yeah, they probably should have recast Ellie, but that's nowhere near the show's biggest problem. Ellie and the rest of the show are let down by some pretty terrible writing choices. It's these writing decisions, not any of the actors, that have led to an inconsistent tone and unlikable characters, making the show incredibly frustrating to watch. I can understand why some people may have liked the season, and I do think the bones of a good story are still there, but for me personally, the show just missed the mark too many times for me to enjoy it. There was a version of this story that could have been one of the most powerful adaptations in TV history, with the potential to correct the course the game went down. But between bizarre character choices, tone-deaf writing, and the fact that they'll probably have to stretch Part 2 into 3 seasons as opposed to the first game story only getting 1, Season 2 makes one thing painfully clear. Joel isn't the only thing this show buried. Alright, see ya!